Hey, hello, and welcome to A to Z Animals. I'm Arnell, and this is our AZ Ask series where we spotlight one of our Earth's MVPs. Today, we are diving into the open ocean with a fantastic guest, Sean R. Van Summerman, who is the executive director of the Pelagic Shark Research Foundation. Sean has been studying and protecting sharks for, is it over 3 decades now?
Since 1990.
Yes, so since
So
1990.
yeah,
And Sean, so thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to get started. So your foundation has pelagic in the name, which isn't a word that most people use every day. What does it mean to you, and why is the open ocean so central to your work?
I will try to be succinct. Something I'm rarely accused of being. For backstory with that, it's an archaic Greek word, I guess, by origin. Uh, Back in 1990, people didn't even know what it was, like the Pneumatic Shark Research Foundation, pelagic. No, pelagic. It means, the open ocean, the high seas, offshore environment, most of the Earth's surface is involved with. And back in late 80s, 1990s, monofilament gill nets and more developed longline fisheries were coming from both sides of the Pacific, and elsewhere around the world. And it was a real slaughter, in terms of, previous take per unit of effort. The CPU data showed that it was very profitable. But it was a real concern at the scale of the take and in the manner and method in which shark fins were taken. And this overlapped with billfish and tunas and a lot of other very important market fish. And so trying to strategize it, one of our original sponsors was San Francisco-based Earth Island Institute, and they were dealing with the dolphin safe tuna issue. And again, a lot of these issues overlap. And so it's like, well, let's go into the heavier end of this big log jam and try to get a little more, appreciation for sharks and molas, and things that people aren't really that thrilled with. You see a mola and people are like, oh, that is so weird, and then next, where's the whales, and they like it, but they're not as charismatic as an otter or a dolphin, baby whales. And, that's changed a lot since 1990. There were ongoing shark killing contests and stuff. So strategizing, we wanted to form a shark specific research group with the intention of gathering data, plugging the gaps, running through the gaps in the data. It was a very data deficient field. I mean, it'll always be that way, but not so much. Things are much more high tech. So pelagic sharks, they were the main kind of hub of bycatch at the time, while people were trying to catch fish that they could sell and people wanted to eat, and indeed need to eat. So that was the idea. We started it looking at blue sharks, mako sharks, white sharks. Many of these species are very charismatic. They look like a shark. They act like a shark. If you hook one on a fishing rod, it's going to fight like hell and look at the teeth and, just all the stereotypical, primate hominin responses to an obviously formidable form of wildlife. And if you can kill it, you're the king for a day or a week or whatever, till they have to tow the thing away, or they dice it up and eat it. But the mentality is varied, and it's hard to reconcile them. I think there's a big improvement in that. But we established the foundation to address the open ocean offshore fisheries.
Where would you say that you feel the strongest connection personally? Or is there a
Oh,
spot that the ocean really reminds you of why this work matters?
that's easy, just because I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, California, and on Monterey Bay, and was traipsing around from on Nuevo Island and Point Lobos, Big Sur, just all over the place. and traffic wasn't bad back then. Just bunch of stuff. So I just really like it here. I've got to travel a fair bit, you
Mhm.
know. Not a whole lot, not like jet setting. It was always for work and stuff. But I got to go to Australia, and Central and South
Okay.
America, and uh, some parts of Asia, Korea, uh, stuff like that. And yeah, I forgot what the question was, but yeah, I've been able to travel a lot. But yeah, Monterey Bay. I've seen a lot of cool places, but Monterey Bay
Okay.
seems to have it all. People, oh, sea turtles, let's go to Hawaii, and let's see orcas, let's go to Alaska. Or these are people in Wisconsin that may not know. On the coast, I think everyone takes it for granted. They're not easily impressed, by that. But my point is that you go to Monterey Bay the right time of year,
Mhm.
and you can find pretty much everything.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, which areas worry you the most when it comes to shark encounters or habitat loss?
Well, of course, our flagship issue since 1990, we never did win that, but we want to get protected status for basking sharks. We were the original sponsor in California back in 1994 through 96 for white shark protected status, which even myself was surprised when we got that through. Assemblyman Dan Hauser of Arcata helped us with the legislation, and Surfrider Foundation and a bunch of other orgs jumped on board and just helped run it through, and just by popular demand they became appreciated. And I think surfers were the main concerns, like a lot of the bureaucrats that I got to meet and know were like, oh, sure, surfers are gonna love you, blah blah. And turns out, yeah, they were, they like sharks, and most of them still do. The shark attacks are so rare, you almost have to try not to put, not to diminish the bad news when it does happen. But I also tell people, the statistics for people falling off the cliff, accidental drownings, boating accidents, surfing accidents. I mean, those are all rising at far more, alarming rates than stingrays or sharks. There's beach closures because a lot of people are, don't know. There's liability, and
Yeah,
they want people not to be shot, see one and just go, where did that come from? Probably
and
right
you
there.
actually educated me when we had our first conversation on the phone. And you told me that livestock actually causes more deaths a year than sharks. That was
I guess
something that shocked
some
me. I was like, wait a
years.
minute, let me look this up. So I was pretty shocked to find out that was true. And that's also why it was something I definitely had to include in that article, just to
I've never
let
seen it
people know
happen, but yeah, it's
yeah,
something like you. I've read, and it sounds,
yeah, it's
I don't know,
true.
plausible. The number of people in and out of the water on a daily basis. If the sharks were, biting, it'd
Right.
be, yeah, it'd be nonstop. They that's the good news. I don't know why it does seem to be different in other locations. I don't know
Mhm.
if our sharks are just way more chill than elsewhere or something. Maybe.
Maybe. Part of it, I definitely think, is the stigma, pop culture. They've given us, Jaws, Sharknado, like the sharks circling. What would you say are like is the single biggest myth about sharks that still frustrates you, and what's the truth behind that?
I guess it's just the kind of the puerile, obvious, canned drama, like, that really does, sometimes fun. You just kick back and crack a beer and just drool and watch Shark Week. The sharks slamming into something
Hmm.
again this year. Every year these sharks are attacking things that these film guys put out by them. They shouldn't do. They should leave the filmmakers alone, right? They're just this weird kind of Shark Week. The meat of it is always the did the shark in 1926 swim up a river and eat kids? And I don't know, it's just kind of predictable. And they've been caught in out and out fiction. I wish there would be, conservation theme, right? But people would scream about that. The people in Florida. I'm just
So
kidding.
if you were to rewrite the movie or like Jaws or Sharknado, what would it look like if it was featuring sharks?
Uh, I don't know, maybe a tour on one of the observer boats that go out and do interdict illegal fishing operations. There's some good combined efforts, like with the US and Canada and Mexico and Japan. Well, they'll go, target some fishing fleets that they don't know, and they know they're cheating, and so you can always find them.
And to be out there for that long and experience the decline firsthand, like emotionally, like what does it feel like to witness that? Like, does it make you feel like overwhelmed? Are you more determined? Like, how do you stay so hopeful in the face of so much ecological loss?
Yeah, I don't know actually how to, because I feel like I'm jaded and cynical. I've been doing it for too long.
Mm.
And I'm like, am I the only guy here that's, you know, anybody else, And if they do,
Mhm.
they'll talk about how marvelous the basking sharks are, how rare they are, how big they are. And then, you know, nothing, it's not they adore them, right? But they don't know the backstory. And so there's no real
Mhm.
concern. Every time they get seen, they say it's a comeback. And what I always do is like with the white sharks, it's like, well, you never admitted they were diminished or
Mhm.
endangered. And here you are now touting a comeback. From what? And why didn't you say anything? When I was catching heat, earlier.
So if you had something that you wanted the public to wake up and, like suddenly care about sharks just as much as they did pandas or polar bears, what are the few things that you would say to get them to care about the basking shark?
I think that it would, the aquariums would be a good gallery for that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Not only uh, historic pictures, but also, kind of an open invitation to wildlife photographers. There's a lot of really good naturalists and whale watching, tour, personnel that have all the equipment and everything, and maybe
Mhm.
like a photo contest for, extant current day live basking sharks, and juxtapose that to the abundances of them and what happened back in the day when we didn't really know better. And it seemed like we had, sardines forever and salmon forever and just, everything, plenty of everything. And so that would be good. That's just an idea. But, the aquariums, could have, I don't know. They're good at that, better than I am.
Yeah,
But the aquariums would be a good place. And then of course,
that would be a good initiative to get them to care about the basking sharks. But
oh, I
what
think
would you
they
say?
do. It's just, yeah, they're so busy doing otters and other things. It's kind
Yeah.
of hard to
So
start this
what
thing, and
would
it's
you?
almost like save Bigfoot. It's like, yeah, we see him every couple of years. Briefly in small numbers. You fly it with the plane, you can't find them sometimes. They're not necessarily bound to the surface and come up at certain intervals. When they're there, they're there. But comparing the data from back when they were, a nuisance to navigation, there were just hundreds of them, thousands of them just here in Monterey Bay. I can't really rank or hierarch, God's creations, the
Mhm.
gods, whoever, life on this planet. It's the best planet I've ever seen. And this, and that would just help. It'd be excellent news for the world, if we had basking sharks at all, uh,
Mhm.
uh, and including any, potential hypothetical comeback would be marvelous. Uh, and we need to prepare for that, with protections and considerations like marine mammals and and other stuff. They're not posing a harm. There's not enough of them to support a commercial fishery. The commercial fishery's been closed for
Mhm.
years. They were declared commercially extinct back in the 50s. So, you couldn't sustain a fishery because there are too few of them now. And but they are vulnerable to, pathogens come out of the water. They're filter feeders. They're
Mhm.
vulnerable to vessel traffic. And, we once found a basking shark that had arrows sticking out of its back.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And, a
insane.
lot of fishing line, other ones had fishing line all over it. So they accidentally get tangled. And then, there's some people that will see that as an opportunity to, back in the 90s, there was a kind of a strong contingent of archery to shoot sharks. I don't think that's coming back. But yeah, there's a vulnerability there that needs to be addressed if they do come back.
Yeah.
And
It seems like
meanwhile,
they
if they're
are
not
really
coming back,
facing a lot of. It seems like they really are facing a lot of different factors. There's climate change, of course, habitat loss, and then as filter feeders, they alone should have that importance. And then as an organism on this earth, they should have that just inherent importance. And so I do want to ask before we wrap up here. So if anyone, for everyone that is listening and that wants to help, what is one simple way that they can support the shark conservation or PSRF's work?
To support our work in particular, contact me through email
Mhm.
or phone. That's a good way, to begin. And then there are other conservation groups, marine. Earth Island Institute in San Francisco. There's Shark Stewards up in San Francisco, and there's a lot of other similar groups around. And then there's turtle themed and otter themed. Participate as best as you can,
Mhm.
and then raise an interest among that peer group and staffers, and especially if you live in an area where there are sharks, to think about, right? If you're in California, certainly if you're in a shark group, conservation themed organization, think about basset sharks. Let's think
Mhm.
about basset sharks. That's why it's the perfect example of a benign, misunderstood, majestic sea creature, never did anybody wrong. And let's, like Canada, so it's not from complete left field to consider getting them protected status.
Of course.
So yeah, Canada did it. What is the holdup? I've never been able to get anyone in on the carpet in the U.S. with National Marine Fisheries Service, with NOAA. There's been massive cutbacks, and it's not easy. But yeah, where is everybody?
So this has been another edition of AZ Ask, featuring one of our Earth's MVPs. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. I do want to remind you all that sharks are not just survivors for millions of years. They're guardians of our ocean's balance, and protecting them really means protecting the health of the seas and ultimately our own future. Thank you guys again for tuning in. I'm Arnell, this is Sean, and this is AZ Ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.